Just a nod will be enough. Great, thank you. So first of all, this is what I look like when I'm completely sick, when I'm not completely sick. I've been to Germany very recently, until a couple of days ago, and apparently I'm too Southern Italian for the good days in Germany. I needed a bit more, clothing, apparently. So, but I will survive for this hour and we will all be fine with it. Today, I'm gonna talk to you about activities, how to take out the cringe, how to use it strategically, and trying to make more engaging, more meaningful sessions, because they're part of all of the learning efforts that we do. Most of them have activities. So it's usually an overlooked aspect of it. Usually, oh, let's make an activity. Why? Because we need an activity. I was like, that's not much. So let's try to see what's more behind it. This will not be a session about, here I give you this amazing framework, it will solve all of your issues. It doesn't exist as far as I know. There is no silver bullet. It's what I've learned in 8 years of delivering learning experiences, of creating activities for students, C-suite level managers, and everything in between. So I learned something on the road and I wanted to share it with you. Now, I want to start with some small premises. There will be some figures of speech I will use throughout this short hour that we have. And I want you to fully understand them before we move forward. The last thing I want to say is that we will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we will have some Q&A at the end, if I survive until then. And so let's go. The first premise is how I see credibility and authority. I see it as a bag of coin that we enter the room with. We have this bag of coin. It's small, normal size bag of coin. And then we spend it with the activities we do, with the way we deliver, the way we talk to people. And we can spend it. We can gain some by doing something extremely good. We can lose it by doing something weird, something that people do not appreciate, putting people in a tough spot. We can also invest it. So our starting stash is what we enter with. We have our own authority. We are seen as the professionals because we are being called to do something. So we do have a starting stash, and that's great. At the same time, as I was saying, we can do some profit and some losses, and that's not very good when it goes on the back end. So the losses are usually when you need to be corrected, for example, by some of the participants. You lose credibility because you're supposed to be the expert most of the times, unless you're just purely a facilitator, in which case, if you have to be corrected, maybe it's the subject matter expert that says something wrong, and then you just ask them, what do you think about this? When it comes to profit, it's about making an exemplary activity or sharing a learning point that was really unseen by people, and you share it with them, and now you gain some coins. Then there is also something that I wanted to mention, which is investments. Sometimes, especially in the fields of activities, which is one of the main things that I enjoy doing, I have to put people through very little distress. So I'm investing some of my coins into giving them a bit of distress, but I will get them back by the end of it when they realize why have they gone through it, what have they learned in the journey, and why wasn't it such a bad idea to go through this tiny bit of distress. And we will see more of that later. I just wanted to share, like, when I talk about a bag of coins, spending credibility, this is what I'm talking about. And sorry if I will ramble a bit here and there. I have at the moment a cocktail of chemicals that are keeping me alive. So I'll need you to cut me some slack there and there for today. Our second premise is how I see activities, because it's important to put it into perspective. How you define activities, how I define activities. Activities are almost anything where you engage your participants, and I think it has 3 pillars for it, which is participation, meaning that everyone must be able to go through the activity in the same capacity and manner as the other. So the most common example is if you have an activity that requires you to run and you have a participant which is in a wheelchair, the first pillar is fallen, the activity crumbles, and it's really a situation you don't want to be in. So it's essential to stalk a bit maybe your participants, understand what are their needs, and see how you can design an activity that involves everyone. You don't want someone to wait in the corner while the other have fun with an activity. Then we have cooperation. So to me, it's essential that people cooperate within each other. I don't consider much of an interesting activity where I give you an assignment and you do it on your own, and then you come back to me with results. So I would like, for example, if I make an activity, I'll say, Kathleen and Gabrielle, you will have to cooperate, and then you have to compare what you found out with Paulina and Jesse. Say, this would be an activity. And the four of you can all do the activity, of course. No downtimes. This is something that people don't see as much important most of the time, some of my colleagues, but I don't want to be waiting on someone else's to do the job. So if I'm giving an activity, I'll assign it, say, to Anne or Mary, and I don't want Anne to be waiting on Mary's to finish the activity or a part of it. I don't want people to be pulling their thumbs back and forth and things of this kind while the others do the activity. So everyone has to be able to participate. People must cooperate within each other, and there should be no downtimes. So everyone must be active at all time. Active could also be listening to something that is being said, which is interesting to you. That's also fine. But you should not be just waiting out. So 3 pillars, gone. Then to do or not to do. This is a session about activities, and you will see the incredible amount of 0 activities within it. And there is a reason for that. It's not always necessary to have an activities. It really depends. So why do we need that activity? So for its effectiveness, so it gets to the goal of the session, to the learning goals. Then if it helps getting there better, sure, go for an activity. It has to be relevant, so strongly connected with what is the session about. I remember once I was doing a session about feedback. It was feedback. And the starting activity, the why part of the activity was, say, me and Samuele, we are paired together. One of us will hold a paper with a drawing, and the other will be in the back trying to draw it as well. So I will tell Samuele, using only shapes, imagine it's a robot, and I say, oh, there is a square at the top, which is the head, and then a square lower, longer, like a rectangle, and blah, blah, blah. And I keep building the robot. And Samuel is doing an awful job, of course, but it's not his fault. It's that, yeah, he's not getting feedback from it, like, oh, it looks like it or not. Does this activity really work? It's loosely connected with the idea of feedback. But it's relevant to a degree, but it's not very effective. You don't need me and Samuele to be awful at drawing to understand you need feedback. So there is no need to make this specific activity. And then practicality. Can we do it decently? Sometimes it would be very nice to have an activity. I would love to have an activity here with you today, but then I thought, I have 1 hour. I'm half dead, and I want to have a Q&A part, and this is called Power Hour. I have 1 hour. So I thought, nah, I will skip. You're all professionals, so I want just to share with you some tips, and I think this would be helpful to you, rather than you go, haha, with an activity later on. So to do or not to do, sometimes we don't do activities because we don't need them, sometimes because we can't, sometimes because we just cannot come up with an activity that justifies the time used for it. Okay, premises are gone. And of course, I tend not to say it, but just if you have any question, you don't have to wait for the Q&A. Just stop me right in, write it in the chat, raise your hand. Samuele, please help what's left of me to see the messages if I miss any, and we'll pull through. Now, the second part is the cringe component. It's in the title, so you should expect it to be here somewhere. What is cringe, first of all? Cringe, again, by definition, is where you make people uncomfortable when they don't want to take part in your activity. When it's uncomfortable on different levels. It can be that you don't want to do it, or you can't really do it, but you have to, so you're forced into it. It can be a lot of things, or it can be just outside of your comfort zone, but so far that you cannot bridge it. Sometimes it is out of your comfort zone, and it's great to explore outside of those bounds, but you need a bridge to connect to parts. And the bridge, if it's too long, it collapses. So maybe being cringe is also that. It's very far away. So I came up with the idea, like with the bag of money, with the cringe line. What is the cringe line? It's that line that if you cross it, you send people into the cringe territory, and we don't want to send people there. Now, as the quote at the bottom says, some sand lines needs crossing, some moving, and some avoiding. The cringe line you can do all of those things with it. The cringe line changes depending on the people you're dealing with, on the warm-up you have done with them, how much you got to know them. It changes with their experience on the job and connected with the topic you're dealing with. So if I'm talking with you that you know a lot about L&D or all L&D professionals, and like I'm here explaining to you what L&D is, it's a bit cringe. Like, do you need to learn from me what is L&D? You don't. I'm just sharing some tips here. Then I was posting on LinkedIn about doing this 1 hour power hour, where it's in the name. And I show the title, and Anna Maria rightfully asks, what's wrong with some cringe? And so I promised her I will talk about planned and unwanted cringe, because they're very different. So the unwanted cringe is what we're trying to avoid at all costs here. The planned cringe instead can be strategically used. I'll give you an example. So first of all, in the beginning, the first slides asks, what does Paracelsus have to do with activity design? Paracelsus was a physician that said that poison is made by the quantity. So even water can be poisonous if there is too much of it in your system. Same goes with cringe. A little cringe can be helpful, and it's really the quantity of it that makes it a poison. I was doing a session on facilitation. Facilitation as in facilitating discussions. So referencing back, bridging connections, who talks, when, how to interrupt people, those kind of things. And I want people to understand how useful it is. Now, imagine I'm telling you, and you don't know anything about L&D at one point, and I say, hey, facilitation is really, really necessary. It helps understanding who talks next, making the conversation move forward if it gets stuck, getting to the point of the idea is not really very strong. So I thought I need a stronger why. I made an activity where I didn't tell them what the session was about, and we started discussing other things, and I facilitated the session horribly, awfully. It's like Kathleen is talking, and I was like, yeah, sure, but Ashwin, what do you think instead? You know, something like that. I was mean within boundaries, but I have been a bit mean. This was planned cringe, because by the end of it, I would ask, so, how do you feel? Everything going good? And some people wanted to slap me across the face. As it's fair, and I'll take it. And so I told them, why? And they explained, oh, because this, I was talking, and then you interrupted and moved on, and you didn't care about... Exactly. So let's see how not to make it for the others. Facilitation techniques, yada, yada, yada. So this was planned cringe, and this is completely fine if you know how to pull it out. I'm very bad at it. So my historical co-trainer, Lisa, was pulling the part about faking being bad or facilitating, and I was cringing in the corner, knowing what was going on. I have to be fair to how things went in reality. And then always regarding cringe, there is culture and context. Some things can be uncomfortable for some culture, not for others, and people within a culture can have a completely different idea of those from other people in the same culture. So every individual is different. You can you cannot judge the bunch by the idea you have of the culture, because individuals within are very diverse. So people see cringe things differently. To me, it cringes when people sing in public transportation. I don't like it. But I love to sing when I'm in a bar with friends and we're doing karaoke and we're having a beer. And that's completely fine. But the same action in another setting to me is very cringe. To some other people is not. And they have parties in the train. And that's seen positively in their culture. Completely fine. But not for me, so I don't do it. Let's see something more about the cringe components. The root causes of it. The audience fit. I've delivered, and I still deliver, it's been 8 years now, with the STEAM, a students organization. They're great, and they are university students. With them, I can afford to make games and activities that would be a bit too cringe for people with a way higher seniority. C-suite level managers, this kind of stuff. Some of them are completely fine with games. In general, you have to be careful with it. So with audience fit, that's what I mean. You can do some things with some people. You cannot do some things with some people. Forced participation, we kind of touched upon it before. If you have people feeling forced to do the activity, maybe we should go back, to the drawing table and see what we can change about it. Now we're gonna have a 10 seconds reminder about question. If someone have or someone wants to share something related to any of those things, please do. Then superficiality in purpose. We also touched about it before. The thing about drawing while the people, so the exercise of feedback. You are drawing and someone else is telling you what to draw and it doesn't work because you're not getting feedback. It's superficial. That's the issue with that activity. It could be a fun activity, but you don't need that to understand the point of it. It's superficial. It's loosely connected with the topic. And that creates cringe. So root causes, mostly done. Now, how do we mitigate it? There is framing and context. I'll give you an example. I was in a training event, and we were learning how to deliver. It was my first training event. It was a TTT, training the trainer, training new trainers kind of event. It was with Esteem, and a good friend of mine, Javier, Javi Casco, he was delivering his first session. And we left the room, and then when we re-entered, all of the chairs were upside down, the desks were on the side. It's like a tornado being through the room. And normally this would be very weird to like, why have you done that? But he framed it as, a tornado, a tempest or something just crossed by and destroyed the whole room, so I will need your help to fix it. So let's do it together. And it was about team playing and working as a team. So people were together lifting heavy desks, and some other people were doing their tiny bits with stools and chairs. So it was fun. It would have been weird otherwise, but he framed it in a way that we don't go into the uncanny valley. So it was clearly a jokey thing. It was not extremely serious. And yeah, it fit well for us. It was actually fun. And we were wondering what's the point of it. And then we realized what was the session about. So I consider it fun. And he mitigated the negative effect of it by framing it as that, by framing it outside of the uncanny valley. For those that haven't heard of the term uncanny valley, is take a robot. When there is a robot that is absolutely looking like a human, it's fine. When it's completely looking as a robot, it's fine. When it's in the middle, it gets very weird. It gets uncanny. You don't want to look at it. Same here. You don't want an activity that should be taken seriously to be taken very lightly, and vice versa. You want it to frame where it is. So mitigation of cringe. Here you go. Framing and context helps a lot. The warm-up. The warm-up is you are going into the activity. You know it's going to happen. And you prepare the people to it over the time of the session. So if I have a very awkward activities for you to do by the end of this 1 hour session, I don't. But imagine if I had. I will tell you now. So be comfortable now because we're going to be uncomfortable in a bit. Kind of thing. So you kind of prepare, you lead up to it, and you make them... I can't English right now. You make it easier for them to accept it later on when it comes to the moment of doing the activity. Choice and agency is one that is usually overlooked, but I wanted to signal it because I think it's very important. Giving the choice to them of doing or not doing something within an activity really changes the way they see it. Say, you can approach the same problem in the activity 2 ways. So you tell them you can do either that or this. And one is particularly uncomfortable and the other is more comfortable. If they choose, when they're given the choice, they may go with the least comfortable one, with the tough one, just because they can choose. Instead, if they have to go through the uncomfortable one, it can feel obligated, and we go back to the forced participation we touched upon before. So giving choices to participants helps greatly. Now, cringe component out of the window. Activities that work. A collection of tips and tricks on how to make activities actually work and not just be there because, oh, we need an activity in this session. There is too much me talking. Let's make an activity.
Giuseppe, maybe
yes.
Just like Paulina raised the hand, maybe before you continue
Paulina
with
raised
part
the hand.
3. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, let's go back.
Hi. Yeah, thank you very much. Giuseppe,
Paulina.
I have a quick question because I'm a little bit confused between the
Please.
part 1 and part 2.
Yes.
The 3 components you mentioned in part 1, participation, cooperation, now downtimes.
Yes.
All of those are forced. There is no choice or agency. And yet later you list choice and agency as one of the ways to mitigate a cringe. So
Yes.
I can't see how those two go together. If you could clarify that, please.
Sure. Sometimes they don't, as in the mitigation techniques are to be used when you expect it to happen. So when you expect something uncomfortable, something to be uncomfortable for someone. The first part, participation, cooperation, and downtimes, it means that given the chance, everyone can do it, everyone will work with the others, and there will be no downtimes. And this goes with all activities to me. Then when you give choice to them, is to mitigate the cringe. So on necessity base, you can do that, and giving the choice helps with that. So that's the way I see it. The first part is in general. So when you do activity design, I think those things are great to have. There are some exceptions. So imagine we are working on introspection works. I can say, me, Giuseppe, will write something introspective about me, and you, Paulina, will do the same. And then you can talk to me about yours, and I talk to you about mine. You may not like it, I may not like it. So those are the choices. Like, you don't have to do it, but there is the option to. So by default, it's there. But I also don't want to force you, especially if it's something private, something personal. You keep it for yourself, and that's completely fine. But the activity has to be designed so that if you want, you can, and also designed so that if you don't want to do it, the activity doesn't become a wreckage. So that's the way I distinguish the two. I don't know if it clarifies it, or if I can throw in another example, because I've done plenty of cringe sessions, plenty of mistakes, so I can pull from an infinite bag.
No, that helps. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Happy I've helped. Moving to the part 3, activities that work, we have harboring engagement. So how to make people interested in your activity. There will be exceptions here as well. I will go to them by the end. So having clear objectives, of course, you want to have an activity that follows learning objectives, and it points people at those to reach them. And it's important that they understand that they're doing it because it gives them something. Unless you want to invest some of the coins, having them clueless until there is the revelation moment, and then you get the coins back. So clear objective, you should have them anyways, of course, as you know. Showing it to them makes it easier for your crowd to buy in the game, but you should always have them clear anyway, just making sure. Emotional and cognitive buy-in, so they should be convinced it makes sense to go through it, or they should don't know they're going through it. So for example, when I did the facilitation one, they didn't knew they were in an activity. They thought they were just discussing. So they were just doing it. Some other times, it's clear that we're going into an activity, and I need them convinced that this is fine. And tangible takeaways. Again, with the activities that I talked about before, the one about feedback and drawing, there is no tangible takeaway other than the obvious. Feedback is good, also that has its own exceptions, but you don't need me to draw a bad robot to understand this. Challenge and flow. There is the difficulty of the activity. I found that if it is too complex, it gets frustrating. If it is too easy, it feels pointless. So in the gaming community, when we want something in the middle, we call it something being in the flow. So we need to be in the flow of an activity that is not either too easy or too tough. The burden of complexity, it's also something often overlooked. I made an activity with the trainer that I mentioned before with Lisa. It was about a group of students getting to know each other culture. So I will explain how the activity worked. And it's going to sound complex, but then I will explain why. So we had around 15 cultures, around 20, 22 people. And we said, culture A and culture B, someone from culture A and someone from culture B, will sit at a table and work together what they know, what they understand of culture C. Then they will go on the stage, present it, and in the back, you will have people from culture C reacting through gestures, to body language, to what they say, and then they will have a moment to go in front and explain and clear any confusion, any misalignment with the reality, stuff of this kind, which you can do with young students. It's easier with adults. It can get tricky. But the point is, it sounds pretty complex. Culture A and culture B talking about culture C, going to the stage, talking, and the other are in the back, and then they switch, blah, blah, blah. Complex. But the burden of complexity is on us. So that's complex to design and not to do. So the instruction that I give to people is, person A and person B, you will talk about person C, and then you come to the stage. That's it. And when I go to the stage, I will say, oh, someone from culture C, come on stage as well. You'll be in the back. You cannot say a word. It's very easy for them to understand what they have to do, but it's very complex for me to put it all together. So that's what I mean with the burden of complexity. It can be very complex, very designed with complexity, but it doesn't have to get into your participants' hands, this complexity. It stays within you. On-the-fly adjustments, you may have to change strategy along the way. A trainer of mine, when I was learning, he made us a session about facilitation once again. And the idea was that we were given a text and we had to find out who was more guilty than others in this text. The idea was we will make a mess out of it, fail incredibly, and have the need for a facilitator. That was their goal. But we just did it very easily. It was like, yeah, this is surely the guiltiest of them all. This is like the best person in the universe. We just bam, 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 did it, 15 minutes, activity done, and absolutely no feeling for the need of a facilitator. It was like, oh, well, the activity was supposed to go this way, but it went this way. So let's do something else. We had something else prepared. So it doesn't always go our way, but that doesn't mean it has to go into the trash immediately. So we can salvage it somehow. There are still some learning points. And after this part 3, there is a 3.1 part about the briefing that can be helpful. Psychological safety. Some people were mentioning it before. It is about no one being left behind. It's about understanding when to have an activity that is collaborative or competitive. So are we together towards the goal? Are we one against each other towards the goal? Psychological safety goes way beyond that. And honestly, there is no time to go through it in this short time. What I make sure to do is that I play out every scenario I create myself, as cringe as it may be for me to do it alone. But when I go through it, I fully understand what people have to go through it. If I have a group of trainers around me, I may want to play it out with them and get some feedback from them, because the design phase and the result part of it, so when you actually deliver it, can be incredibly different. I remember some students of mine, they had to design an activity, and they designed one when 2 people were standing at opposite sides of a room, and then they have to walk through the middle and reach the other end of the room. And while at the middle, they should convince the other to join them, so to follow them. So one would get to their goal and the other would not. The issue with that activity was that it's too fake to work. I know that I have to go there, so why should I be convinced from you to go the other way? We both know the other wants to grab us with them. It was uncomfortable for some people having to make a fake discussion about, hey, you should come with me. No, you should come with me. But I started pulling each other. So now, psychological safety goes well beyond all of the things that I can cover it right now. It's just essential to understand where people are feeling uncomfortable and for which reason. Play it out. The dinner test is, imagine your participants have just done your discussion. They leave the room, they go to have dinner, they talk within each other. How would they talk about your activity? Would it be, oh, we did this thing, it was amazing, or Jesus, I had to do this thing, it was awful? Or they just wouldn't talk about it. So playing it out and dinner test helps with a bit with psychological safety. Then I would say experience is what does the most. So you've been through enough activities and sessions yourself to understand when something is not the case to have, or is it. This could be another power hour on itself. Now, as I was saying, don't worry, Samuel, I'm not having you do more work for it. The part 3 has a little appendix, which is the briefing. The briefing is a way to equalize knowledge by the end of an activity. I try to have it all the time. See it as an instrument to equalize the knowledge in the room. This is how I see it mainly. So it equalizes the knowledge. A lot of learning solidifies in there. You make sure people understood what you want them to understand. And from participation to insight, it means, yeah, you have done it, but what have you taken out of it? Maybe your participants missed the point. Maybe it was your design not being perfect. Maybe it was them thinking about another thing from their own experience and not getting to the point you wanted them to go to. So I use a model for that, which is called the 4F model. The 4 Fs being facts, feelings, finding, and future. And it's a series of things you want people to go through with you at the end of your activities and session. So the first part is facts, is about objective reality. It grounds the activity. So we just go through what we have done. If I was to do a 4F model with you right now, I would say, what have we talked in the beginning? And it was, oh, some premises, the bag of coin, stuff like this. So what we've all been through, what have we done today is the question, the example question. Feelings instead is the subjective reality. So how was it for you? Did you think something was wrong, something was right, something could be said more, less, etc., etc. The findings instead is where we extract the insights. So maybe, hopefully, after this session, you got some insights about activity design. Say we have Katie went through the session as Jesse went through this session. But Katie realized something that Jesse hasn't, and Jesse realized something that Katie hasn't. So if I asked them all, what have you learned about the session, through the session, thanks to the session, Katie will tell me something, Jesse will tell me something, and it will not stay within them anymore. It's out in the open for everyone to grab. So through this debriefing, we are taking the single experience that an individual usually holds for themselves, and we share it with everyone. That's what I mean with equalizing knowledge. And the last part is the future. So, okay, you listen to me. What do you do now? How can we make sure that what you learn will be used soon? I, for example, am a terrible reader. I cannot focus my attention on reading large books too often, unfortunately. So I try the best to help myself out with this. The books that I want to read are here on my desk. So it's easy for me to grab them and start reading anytime. This future part is about doing the same with your concept for your participants. So how can they get this book closer to them so it's easier to read it? How can I make sure that you've taken something out of this session and you can implement it the next time? I would ask, so how can you use it? Is there a design you're preparing that you think you can change a bit thanks to what you've learned today? Something of this kind. I want to make it easier for you to use what I shared with you. Creating a bridge between the lesson, the training, the learning, and reality and application. This also helps a lot with activities that have a high level of abstraction. So if you abstract, because it's easier to learn something through abstract means, then you have to bring it back to reality for it to work. Otherwise, for example, this activity when the people have to walk from the other side of the room, meet in the middle, and then continue, you don't want to be good at convincing people to follow you in the other side of the room. You want to be good at discussing with people. So how do you bring those learning back to reality? Yeah, that's the briefing. I wasn't going to insert it in the original idea, but then I thought it's going to be particularly useful. I've heard of a lot of people that don't use it, and I think it can be particularly useful. So Here you go. I use it at the end of every activity, every large activity, and I do what I call a meta debrief at the end of every session. So the one up immediately after the activity is to ground the activity, equalize the experience, equalize the learning points, and bridging reality and learning. The one that I do at the end does the same, but for the whole length of the course or whatever it is. Usually it's 2 hours short sessions. I go through what have we done today? How was it for you? What have you learned? How can we use that? Things of this kind. And the first part, the facts, some people skip it. I would advise not to do it because it really helps people remember some of the things. I don't think you will remember everything that I just said. So it's important to go through the facts in order to solidify that those things happen, and now we have it in the back of our minds for a little longer so that we get to the point of using them. We're about to end. I will stop talking. Then we will have a short Q&A, and then you will go on with your day, and I will go to die in my bed. So that's the plan for today. The first one I wanted to mention about alternative formats. So other ways we can do activities. Usually we think of remote sessions on Zoom like this one, or in a classroom setting. I just wanted to mention there is more you can do. For example, with this team, we planted a forest as an activity. We used a ship to travel Europe to teach about entrepreneurship. And of course, we called the ship Entrepreneurship. It was the silliest name game you can think of. But that's also a very long activity that serves the purpose. We are all together, alone, isolated from the rest of the world. It's only one thing to focus on. You have to be a team player, get to know the other people. It was really enjoyable. It doesn't have to be only in the room. It doesn't have to be only on Zoom. It can be outside. It could be if you have a session about communication. Let's go to the grocery store, and if there are no many people around, talk with the cashier, have a little interaction, use some techniques to make their day better. Give them a compliment, maybe. Usually, some people have to learn about giving compliments because they find it awkward to get out and say, "Hey, I love your hair." There's nothing wrong with that. Some people are not able to do it, so let's try it in the real world. We don't have to do it in the room. Like have an activity where me and Samuela, we have to get in a pair and compliment each other on random stuff. It would feel incredibly awkward. I'm not going to do it somewhere. It's just a very bad example. But that's the point. I say, "Oh, I love your hair, Samuel." I say, "Great." That feels extremely awkward to do that. It's not genuine. I was asked to do it. Go out, compliment someone in the street, for example, something of this kind. We can do stuff outside of the room. VR is, I know some people that are experimenting a lot with learning in VR. There are some great applications for it, so it's just something to consider. A role play done right is what I said with the cashier, with somebody else outside. If I role play with Samuel about giving each other a compliment, it can be weird, but if you do it with someone from the outside, someone that is just working in the building where you are holding the conversation, can be more helpful, feels more genuine, more natural, realistic, stuff of this kind. I think Gabrielle was also asking about something for how do we make it a bit more engaging, maybe in remote, how do we make it less cringe, stuff of this kind. So for example, there are tons of new applications that are coming up, and for the shakers, us the shakers, there is butter should be in our list of tools, for example. It really helps with making more engaging sessions. I just didn't use it because for me it had a little problem the last time, so I thought I'll go with the secure Zoom thing, but it would have been more fun, honestly, with the other. So I had to practice it a bit more, and then I can use it myself. There are some applications where you have your own character and you move around this digital playground and you get together close to someone, and now you can hear each other from the microphone, and then if you separate, you don't anymore, and you can use it as an alternative way to have breakout rooms or group activities, stuff of this kind. Miro is expanding a lot their capability of what you can do with it. So really, the world is your oyster with it, and we can explore something more in the Q&A. Then some real examples. Lego Serious Play. Are there any of you professionals in it? Someone that delivers it, maybe? Haven't been lacking with that today. Oh well. But the point is, Lego Serious Play, it is a game in a way, but it also doesn't cringe anyone ever. Why? Because it's designed to be so. It's used by the youngest hire in the company, and it's used by the CEO in the company. It just works because it's well designed. It has clear purposes. It has a lot of credibility, so the bag of coins is really full. Yeah, so we can make games for C-suite, and that's not the issue. The issue is how we design them. Lego Serious Play is a good example of this. The Esteem's iCat is the session I told you before about the culture and people going in the stage and the ones in the back, etc., etc., etc. I could do that with students where their ideas about cultures are not that cemented. It's way easier to discuss those things openly without anyone taking it too personal or getting offended with it. But some other crowd, I would disagree regarding the use of it, of those kind of things. So talking about culture, something particularly sensitive, and we need to be sensitive enough to know it. Javi's Tornado is the activity where all the things were on the floor. If you have a group of people with a tie and suit get into the room and it's a complete mess, it's very awkward if you don't welcome them immediately, showcasing this as a scenario, saying, oh, a tornado just passed by. Of course no tornado passed by. Of course it is framed as a game, then can work. Otherwise it wouldn't, but it's up to you. So you're moving that cringe line back and forth depending how you present it. Then I hope you got some new perspective. We now have around 10 minutes of Q&A, so we can discuss a bit more about things. And I think we have already our first question, and it is from Gabrielle, I think. Yes. And I like the way you're thinking about the briefs. Glad you added it. Thank you, Mary. It's something I really like, and usually it's overlooked. But again, I think it's really, really essential to cement what you have learned, especially when you have more time to do it. Gabriela asks, how do you all evaluate the effectiveness of your activity design? One simple thing we do is we ask the facilitator to stay 15 more minutes and ask how they feel when the memories are still hot and fresh. Well, it's a question to all, it seems. So if anyone wants to chime in, I have my answer, but I would like to hear some of yours as well. It's about, I would imagine, the evaluation of the training session, which is one of the toughest things to do. Also because justifying paying for learning efforts is very tough. So we need some great evaluation. Anyone wants to share something? Seems everyone is very shy, Gabriel. The way to evaluate sessions, there are multiple. The one you're saying to me is one part of it. So you have the evaluation on the moment. So how was it? Was it fine? Was it boring? Was it exciting? How was it in general? Then you have to see if people apply this. So you'll need to stick around longer. It works best when you're not a consultant, a freelancer consultant, but when you are an in-house L&D specialist, because you will see the change in how people deal with things depending on what's the topic of your session. And then when you have enough of an A/B testing, I remember there was another shaker that had to do a session about selling, marketing, and it was about a shop that sells bras. There were multiple stores that sell bras from the same company, and in one of those they delivered a session on how to sell them better. And then they compared the results between this one and another one that didn't have the same session. Let's see how they change, taking into account pregress differences, which they had for years back. So they could predict like, oh, okay, this is changing something, this is not changing something. In this case was an A/B testing of sort. They were seeing how things changed, where it was possible to check, and in the other, nothing changed. So was it a positive change? Was it a negative change? This was one way. And we have Kathleen answering also your question, Gabrielle. She's saying, I think participants' feedback can be best anonymous. People can be afraid to hurt the facilitator's feeling, especially if they know them. Very true. What I do is when I'm in person, I have a feedback box with a lot of Post-its stuck on the side of it and some pens. People just take it, write something, put it into it's usually a shoebox with a hole in the top, and they don't have to write their name. If they want, they can leave an email or their name, and I contact back with some information if I was lacking something about it. Or they can just write it anonymously. You can get some insults. That's the fun part. But that's when you have like a class of 100 people, some of them are bound to write something weird. But yeah, it's great to give the option to give it anonymous. There are some services, I can't think of the name on the top of my head, but I can get back at you with it, that allow you to do it remotely, because you said this is where you work, Gabrielle, so remote interactions. They can have a word cloud with comments they can write on, and then you can see how it went. But I think that this is just the short-term evaluation. So how are the feelings immediately after the session? One thing that I like to do is texting people like 1 month, 2 months after it, saying if they have used anything that I've shared with them, or anything changes at all in the way they do things. So is there a behavior change? Do they even remember they had a session? Sometimes if it's not well designed, they may not even remember they had it, or they can remember because of how bad it was. So also coming back at them months after helps a lot. And I would suggest to do that. I don't know if you are in-house or a freelancing consultant. If you are in-house, you have way more opportunities to do that. As a consultant, it's way more tough though.
Yeah, I'm working in-house, but I actually never get the chance to follow up. It's usually multiple projects at the same time, and after the project's delivery, you move on to the next thing. So we just really do anything that's beyond like asking on the fly, and also send some questionnaires afterwards. So just curious to know how other organizations behave. Is there anything differently people are doing? Yeah, but thank you.
No problem. There is also Anne saying that at the end of an online session, you can also just send a Google form anonymously. So that could be as easy as it gets to get some feedback. Also, I remember I think it was another ID Power Hour, but I may be mistaken. But if you search on the YouTube account of L&D Shakers, I'm sure there was a session about evaluation and return of investment in learning. So there is more than one videos about it. So I suggest there you may get way more insights about the specific issue as well. Right. Any other question? Any other thing you would like to discuss? So we have some 5 minutes more to go.
I will ask a question, Giuseppe. If I can, even if I, in a way, like maybe we can.
Are you asking me
chances.
permission? Go ahead, man.
Yes. I really liked the idea of giving choices to participants. Is something I experimented a bit with, and I was wondering, because of course you can give choice on how to engage, right, with the activity, their role, indeed, like more active or more like an observer. And I also try to give choices about maybe the complexity they they choose to challenge themselves, right? So when I can, and I'm maybe not 100%, and I'm kind of, I have the assumption that maybe there are different levels of knowledge or expertise in the room. I try to kind of build up like activity in kind of steps, maybe kind of people can jump, I don't know, and continue from step 2 onwards and maybe get to the end, while others can kind of start from the beginning and maybe then get only halfway. Do you have any experience like we kind of breaking down the complexity of the activity itself? And maybe what would be your take on it?
breaking down the complexity. So would it mean going through less hurdles and less difficulty based on a choice the participants make?
Yes. So, for example, I mean, maybe it's not too much about soft skills, but I had this kind of digital upskilling workshop, and I was like, okay, maybe if you have not much experience with like this software, maybe you can do this. Or instead, if you're kind of already familiar with it, either you can do the same, or you can kind of already start from this point onwards. And I kind of prepare, like some material that in a way would kind of comply with like both levels of of knowledge, of progressive knowledge.
So I'm all for giving a choice. It can also be in the way they approach the activity. But what you're saying here, it seems to me, it is a difference in experience with the topic. So it kind of changes a bit the way you deal with it, because this is more of an issue of having to equalize where people are. So bringing everyone to the same level and then continuing together. Instead, if there is a difficult and a simple way to share something, to discuss about something, I rarely see the reason to go with the more complex ones. I was reading the other day a study that was saying how the high level of to say that the complexity of wording in papers makes it more complex for people to understand and apply them, and how this is hindering advancement in some science fields. So if you can share something the simplest way, I would go with this one, honestly. What you were talking is the difference in understanding of a topic, and here my take would be bring everyone at the same point and then progress forward. Or if it's something obvious, just mention it briefly for the people that may not know it. For example, before I was saying something about I think the briefing. I think half of you, at least, if not more, know what the briefing is and that definition of the briefing. But the way I see it can be different from yours. So I thought of sharing it anyway, and then just moving on with explaining some more specifics about it. But I had to make sure we're all on the same page before. So it seems more like this than the giving a choice in an activity fashion, if I got it correctly.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
No problem. In the meanwhile, Gabriel got another answer on the chat, and Efrat has to leave us. We had 1 more minute. I can stay for a couple more if you want to discuss about something. So if you have something more you would like to talk about and share, great moment to do that. I hope I haven't bored you too much with my endless talking. It was the only way for me to get forward to the end of the hour. And then I have another block of medicines to take to continue for the rest of the day. Thank you, Kathleen. Too kind. Yeah, goodbye.
Maybe while we see if actually there's a last question, I also share in the chat like the link to the calendar of future events of the Shakers for the participants who are interested. And yeah, thank you very much also for joining today.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. If you have any other question of those that have survived through the end of the session, contact me on LinkedIn, through the Shakers. I'm in the Slack as well. So always happy to talk with Shakers about anything ED related or not. I just want people to be around, honestly.
Thank you very much, then Giuseppe, and I think I'm gonna close the session.
Yep.